So hello, I'm Pedro. I'll be presenting you this concept I think I made up. Something I've learned is no one makes stuff up. Someone probably thought about this before me, but I didn't copy it from anyone, so I'm just going to say I made it up. So this concept I made is all code. So first, I'll explain where this all comes from, I think. So, first, I'm Pedro, as I said. Hello again. Just a brief background about me for those that don't know me. I took my bachelor's degree here in the Algarve, and after that I took a post-graduation in cybersecurity. But in between all that, I've built a company which I've been hard at working for the past 3 years. I do everything there, which is sort of why I had to come up with this concept. So what do I mean by everything? And this is a difficulty I had, because aside from actually doing everything, you have to learn everything. Learning, well, you do it once and you can sort of get the hang of it, but doing, it's a constant process, and it's something that has to be efficient. So while in a regular company, you have departments for everything, having someone doing everything has to be sort of studied, okay? So I have a tech company, so I do all the development, obviously, but aside from that, I had to do all the design, all the sales, all the accounting, and this is the biggest motivator, all the documentation for getting grants, and once you get a government grant, you have to make reports on that and presentations, and so I had to do a lot of paperwork regarding those grants. And so this was my life, a life of constant reports, constant presentations, and endless paperwork. I just had to find a better way to do all that. And so as a programmer, I was used to coding, which is sort of why this came up. One thing that I identified that was absolutely killing my productivity was this thing called context switching. That's when you have to change from one context to the next. So if you're working on two things at once, that sort of kills your productivity because you have to keep moving back and forth. And in my case, I had to keep changing from Word to my code editor to my cloud provider. So I couldn't focus on one thing. So I came up with all code. All code is the mindset of never exiting your code editor. And so I try to use text-based editors for everything I can. I made up this concept, as I said previously, and I gave it this name as a kind of way to revolt against no-code. So I saw that people were introducing no-code in everything, and I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to introduce code in things that weren't code. And this is not to be confused with full code, which is when compared to no code, just using code in your whole application. And so what do I do with all code? Well, I do presentations, reports, and diagrams. I do a bit more, but these are the three that saved me the most time. And so the first advantage of all code is, as I mentioned, a single code editor that you use to do everything. And you are used to your automations, to your shortcuts. They don't change. One thing that absolutely infuriated me was when using Word, all the shortcuts being different. Control F doesn't search for text. I have no idea what it does. I wanted to print something. Control P doesn't print. And that kept slowing me down. And so being able to use a single software for every single task helped me tremendously. This isn't as impressive anymore, but I started doing this a few years ago when ChatGPT wasn't a thing. And so being able to use AI on Word at the time was something like completely revolutionary for me. I also used to teach at this time, and being able to prepare like a whole semester in 2 afternoons was something that absolutely blew my mind. Right now, you can probably use ChatGPT for these things, but GitHub Copilot was my ChatGPT and did a lot of things that ChatGPT is used for nowadays. Another advantage I saw in this is, since I had to make a lot of documents, there was some difficulty getting consistency between documents. If you do everything in code, and that gets passed through a theme to the final document, branding is super easy to get, and with none of the nonsense that sometimes Word and other software introduce, like empty last pages, your documents just look a lot cleaner and a lot more consistent, which really helps branding. And as I said before, avoiding context switching is absolutely great with this. This was also a huge advantage for me. I was able to use my fancy keyboard when I spent a lot of money with, usually with no-code applications. So the traditional software people use, you use your mouse a lot. And that's something that slowed me down, because the interfaces kept changing and I kept having to move my mouse I don't know where. With keyboard, I have shortcuts and I'm super fast with the keyboard. That's something that really helped me. And using version control. Well, if it's code, you can use Git. You don't have to have the nonsense of having manual versions of documents. After this, what I did when ChatGPT came out is I sort of became a ChatGPT programmer. So with usual programming, you have conditions. If X, then do Y. A ChatGPT programmer doesn't do that. They do, this is X, this is an example of X, now do Y. So the first thing that absolutely blew my mind with this was when teaching, I had a Java test. I gave that to ChatGPT and said, make this into an SQL test. They have nothing to do with each other. Well, it gave me a perfect test with sort of the same difficulty, sort of the same structure. And that was the biggest advantage I saw at the time, is I had absolutely no work making the second test, because the first one was already following this philosophy of all code, and so it was already only text. Fitting into ChatGPT was super easy. I also had to create some reports that in the past I'd use scripts to create those reports. Now, being a ChatGPT programmer, what I did was, here's the example of a report. Here are the data for the new report. Create the new report with this. And it worked marvelously. There's also something to be said about the learning curve. So yes, it's hard to start working completely in code, maybe more for some than for others. If you're already a programmer, well then, you're maybe already familiar with Markdown, which many of these tools use, then you'll have a bit of an easier time at the start. But to me, the biggest advantage is there are multiple tools, which I'll show later, which I'll call the all code tools. And they're very similar. So most times they have a similar base, so whether it is Markdown or something else. And so the syntax and the knowledge you learn from one tool is very easily transferable to the next tool. And just a small comparison, as I said previously. The navigation, I love it. I love using the keyboard. And I'm not an old guy with a CLI dependency, okay? I also love the customization you can get from it. So I use VS Code, and I love to have it absolutely the way I want it. And being able to carry this to all my workflows is awesome. And that goes hand in hand with integration. So VS Code has a bunch of plugins for grammar checking, for AI, for collaboration. And that is available on all your workflows. So creating documents, creating diagrams, creating presentations. And we can skip this. And AI assistant is almost universal. I've never had any trouble integrating this with AI. Sometimes I need a few more steps. And so maybe a year ago, this presentation would be a bit more impressive. But right now, you have ChatGPT for Word, so it's nothing new. But having an AI help you and be there in the process of not only writing code, but also writing documents is very helpful. Okay. So, I've talked about the advantages, but I'll share with you some of the tools I learned. So, the first one, the tool I used to make this presentation, which I've adapted for creating Word documents, the equivalent. It's not meant for that, but I adapted it, is MARP. MARP has a very simple syntax, which I'll show here, which is basically Markdown to Word. Ooh, that's going to be an issue. Where the heck is my mouse? So, as you can see, the structure very easily translates, and you can have comments. I use them as speaker notes. The Markdown syntax that many of you might be familiar with directly translates into a presentation. And you can make a theme in order to have consistent presentations all across the board. And so, for me, it's really useful to not having to worry about any sort of alignment, any sort of small concerns that you'd usually have with PowerPoint. Here, this is the text I want, okay? Just do it. And it's also really useful to be able to ask tools like ChatGPT for a whole presentation. Most of this was written by ChatGPT. And that is, for me, the biggest advantage with this all-code mindset, okay? In terms of diagrams, so with software, I've had to make a lot of diagrams, and most of you are probably familiar with that. There are many tools for this. I personally love DB Diagram for creating databases. And those first three are used for all sorts of UML diagrams. Anything from sequence diagrams, activity diagrams. If you're familiar with those, you can probably create them using this. I've also used other tools that Mermaid also has, which is creating flowcharts. And once you explain your AI how one of these tools works, and so that example, that thing I said, this is X, now give me Y, then you can have ChatGPT write sequence diagrams for you, flowcharts, any kind of thing that should be graphical content, and you can have an AI generate that for you. And you can have version control on that. And you can have all the advantages that you're used to with coding on those graphical tasks. I've also extended this to actual code. So I said all code is about inserting code in tasks that usually don't have code. But I've also inserted this philosophy in code, usually to better work with AI. And so I've substantially reduced the amount of comments about internal functioning of my code, which usually wouldn't even before AI, wouldn't be very common to use. And I've tried to use frameworks and workflows where everything is self-sufficient. And so you don't have to have something in multiple files to edit it, such as in some web frameworks, where one page is split across multiple files. And of course, reducing boilerplate, everyone loves that, even if not for this. So yeah, should we all uninstall Office? Well, no. I wanted to show you what all code is, but I have Office open right now. I have Word and Excel open on my computer right now. You can use this for a lot of your workflows, and I wanted to show you that you can save a lot of time with this. But this probably doesn't replace everything, and it shouldn't. Well, these are Office and other softwares are tools highly specialized for specific tasks. And so it would make no sense that this would completely replace them. But maybe you can replace 90% of your tasks with this mindset, and you'll save a lot of time. And you can even use all code with tools that aren't all code. Well, it's not an or. You can use both. Okay. Well, that was my talk.
Yeah.